In this video, I'll be changing the coolant in my first generation Nissan Titan. Nissan recommends this service every 60,000 miles or 4 years for 2004 through 2010, or every 105,000 miles or 7 years for 2011 through 15. The tools you need for this job are a 19mm socket and ratchet or wrench, an 8mm socket and ratchet, some pliers, a coolant tester, a funnel, and a catch pan. If you're draining the cylinder block as well for engine removal or repair, you'll need a 14mm socket and extension, as well as some longer pliers, and some high temperature thread sealant for the cylinder block drain plug. Get started by rotating the key to the on position, turn on the HVAC system, and rotate the temperature control dial to its hottest setting. Wait 10 seconds, and then turn off the key. With the engine cold, use a thick cloth to remove the radiator cap. Looking under the front passenger side of the truck, locate the radiator drain and slide the catch pan into position. Now the shop manual does call for removing the skid plate, but I found it was possible to use some tubing connected to the radiator drain to route the coolant into the catch pan. Using a 19mm socket or wrench, loosen the drain plug by a few turns, then wait to allow the coolant to fully drain from the radiator. Also, if your truck is on a slight incline towards the passenger side, you may be able to use the skid plate as a funnel into the catch pan. Just make sure you thoroughly clean the area afterwards. After the coolant is finished draining, retighten the drain plug. Keep in mind that this is a plastic plug inside a plastic spout, so do not over-tighten. The following steps are for completely draining the system for engine removal or repair. Skip ahead if you're just doing a drain and refill. Use a 10mm socket to remove the oil filter access panel. Then using the long pliers, slide back the hose clamp and remove the hose from the driver's side behind the oil filter to drain the left bank from the oil cooler hose. For the right bank, the drain plug is located just behind the alternator using a 14mm socket. Keep in mind that this bolt is sealed in place with high temperature thread sealant, so it'll be extremely difficult to break loose. After draining the coolant from the radiator, it's time to move on to the reservoir tank. It's held in place by 3 8mm bolts on the top, the front, and the driver's side down low. Pull back the hose clamp from the upper hose and get it out of the way. Remove the lower hose from its clip, take off its hose clamp, and carefully disconnect it from the reservoir, paying special attention not to get any coolant onto the drive belt. Pour out any remaining coolant from the reservoir into the catch pan, and inspect the old coolant for signs of rust, corrosion, or discoloration that indicate you need to do a full flush of your cooling system. More on that in a minute. Now clean the reservoir tank with some distilled water before putting it back in the truck. Reattach the lower hose first and slide up the hose clamp. Then slide the reservoir back into position. Reattach the upper reservoir hose, making sure it's correctly routed into position, and slide its clamp in place. Reinstall the 3 8mm bolts on the front, top, and side. If you need to do a complete cooling system flush and not just a drain and fill, then fill the radiator and the reservoir tank to the max line with distilled water. Reinstall the radiator cap, but leave the vented reservoir cap off. Start the engine and run it until it reaches normal operating temperature. Rev the engine 2 or 3 times, stop the engine, and wait on it to cool down. Drain the water from the radiator, and if necessary, repeat the procedure until clear water comes out. When it's time to refill the radiator with coolant, the shop manual does call for a Venturi assembly with an air compressor to create a vacuum inside the cooling system before refilling. However, it can be refilled with simply using a funnel, although it may take a few extra times checking it afterwards to make sure all the air bubbles are out of the system. Refill using a 50-50 coolant to concentrate premix, or here I'm using Prestone all vehicle concentrate and distilled water to get to a 50-50 water to coolant mixture. Keep in mind that if you did flush the cooling system with distilled water, you'll have a little extra water in the right and left banks of the engine block, so ratio accordingly. As you're filling the radiator with both caps off, watch the fluid level on the reservoir, and when it reaches the max line, put the cap on the reservoir. To remove most of the remaining air pockets from the engine, crank the engine and allow it to warm up with the radiator cap still off. With the engine running, slowly add more coolant. Be careful not to spill any coolant onto the drive belt. When the radiator is full, resecure the cap on the radiator and shut off the engine. Allow the engine to fully cool before rechecking the radiator and reservoir. If you did not use premix coolant, it's a good idea to use an antifreeze tester to check the ratio. It should be at -34 degrees Fahrenheit freeze point. If necessary, add premix coolant to completely fill the radiator. Check the reservoir, making sure that the level is at the max line. Add more coolant if necessary. I hope you found this video helpful. Drop any questions or comments you have in the comment section below. Don't forget to click the like button and also subscribe to the channel if you're not already.